Tonight, religion and politics on a collision course. President Bush facing tough battles with lawmakers over church and charity, life and death, faith and hope. A revolution in health care, the HMO that says it'll put patient satisfaction ahead of profits. Victims of modern-day slavery here in the United States. And Eye on America investigates work-at-home jobs that could put you in the poorhouse.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. Two major policy decisions facing President Bush are reaching critical mass. Both involve the combustible mix of politics and religion. The president's latest bid to win support for funneling more federal tax dollars to what he calls faith-based charities may have backfired in a dispute over laws already on the books concerning discrimination against gays. More about that shortly. First, CBS's John Roberts reports there's new information tonight that could figure into the president's yes or no decision on federal funding for medical research using embryonic stem cells.
A confidential report obtained by CBS News is the latest evidence of the promise of embryonic stem cells. Drafted for President Bush by top scientists at the National Institutes of Health, it will play a key role in the president's decision whether to ban federal funding for research on embryonic cell lines or, as the medical community is urging, press ahead.
The promise is real because of the remarkable capability of these cells, and we've never had that kind of potential in medicine or biology before.
Just as remarkable is the pressure being brought to bear on Mr. Bush. The Roman Catholic Church, a constituency the president needs to win re-election and actively courted today with a visit to St. Patrick's Cathedral, is strictly opposed to such research.
We have, an absolute view that the ends don't justify the means, that exploiting or destroying innocent life at any stage is not justified by the consequences.
On the other side, the president is taking heat from members of the Reagan administration, who, while stridently anti-abortion, see the potential for treating diseases like the Alzheimer's that afflicts their former boss.
This can be a defining moment for compassionate conservatism. This can be a defining moment for George W. Bush being able to relate to every American family.
In Congress, the battle lines are being drawn. House conservatives Army, DeLay, and Watts denounced what they call an industry of death, while in the Senate, conservative Orrin Hatch calls embryonic research the ultimate pro-life decision, and today vowed if President Bush won't fund it, Congress will.
I think there's going to be legislation if he does turn it down, and I do believe that we'll be able to get enough votes to pass it.
There's a sense tonight that the president has enough political cover on the right to support embryonic stem cell research. But with Mr. Bush scheduled to meet the Pope on the 23rd, it's impossible to underplay the agony the decision is causing here. Dan?
John Roberts at the White House. As for President Bush's widely publicized faith-based initiatives plan, the Salvation Army became ground zero today in a dispute over what Mr. Bush is willing to give religious charities to get their backing for it. CBS's Jim Axelrod has the story, chapter and verse.
Providing help to 39 million people a year, the Salvation Army likes to call itself America's most popular charity. But tonight, that image of care and compassion is taking a backseat to backroom politics. According to the Washington Post, this Salvation Army document details a firm commitment from the White House to circumvent state and local anti-discrimination laws in hiring gays. In return, the Salvation Army would support the president's faith-based initiative proposal.
There is no agreement whatsoever between the Salvation Army and the White House.
While both the Salvation Army and the White House deny there ever was a deal.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
The Salvation Army is quite clear it wants protection from anti-discrimination laws, so that its hiring practices can be consistent with its Christian beliefs.
We want to preserve existing laws that give us the right to make employment decisions based upon religious values.
This is just the latest controversy for the plan the president hoped would be the cornerstone for a fresh approach to social services. A plan which religious organizations from the moral majority to the Mormon Church have stepped away from, and which civil rights and gay organizations were criticizing today.
If there is a backroom deal that would sanction some kind of discrimination against the gay and lesbian community without an open and honest and public debate, that is reprehensible.
Tonight, critics of the president's plan are saying this is just one more example that the idea of faith-based initiatives is essentially unworkable, that religious organizations are free to discriminate. The government is not. Dan?
Jim Axelrod, thanks. A coalition of religious groups said today it will seek to amend the U.S. Constitution to declare that marriage may exist only between a man and a woman. Like any other constitutional amendment, this would need to be ratified by both houses of Congress and 38 states to become law. On the matter of whether there's to be any serious campaign finance reform, a key vote in the House of Representatives is expected before the week is out. The House has passed it before. The Senate did so recently. Sponsors say they're optimistic. So it's a done deal, right? CBS's Bob Schieffer on Capitol Hill has the real deal. Bob?
Well, Dan, efforts to pass this campaign finance reform legislation hit a real snag today. The most influential African American in the House decided not to take a leadership role in trying to back reform. Supporters had been counting on Charlie Rangel, the ranking Democrat on the powerful Ways and Means Committee, to help them convince members of the Congressional Black Caucus to support the bill. But Rangel told them he will support the bill, but won't press other members to do so or sign a letter endorsing the bill that went out today. Now, that is important because the caucus members are all Democrats and overwhelmingly supported this legislation in the past. But they've been wavering lately because opponents have been telling them that these reforms will substantially cut back the money they've been getting for get-out-the-vote drives in their districts. So if support among the Black Caucus falls off substantially, and this may be a sign that it is, it's going to be very difficult to pass this legislation. Dan.
Bob Schieffer on Capitol Hill. Also coming to a head in Congress is what's generally known as the Patient's Bill of Rights, including a strong provision that would allow some patients to sue their HMOs. Whether it passes or not, CBS's Sandra Hughes reports tonight, there is one big HMO that's giving doctors now an added incentive to keep patients satisfied.
Longtime HMO patient David Santiago says for years he felt like his doctors were in a hurry to get rid of him. But now that one of California's biggest managed care providers says patient satisfaction is more important than controlling costs, he's hopeful that will change.
It seemed like, okay, you pay your copay and you come in, you get like a minute with the doctor and then they move on to the next patient. And but it seems to have improved in the recent past, and I guess it's going to improve more in the future.
Blue Cross, like most HMOs, had based its doctors' bonuses on how inexpensively they operated, encouraging less testing and shorter office visits. Now it will survey patients' satisfaction and reward doctors for things like giving sufficient tests and following up on treatment at home.
We believe this will help patients and physicians build trust in the system.
Praises abound for the idea, but so do questions about the HMO's change of heart.
Patients advocates say it's the threat of the Patient's Bill of Rights that motivated the move.
It's clearly an attempt by the HMO industry to derail HMO reform, to basically say we're going to reform ourselves so we don't need Congress to act or the president to sign a bill.
Dr. Alan Steinberg, who wrote a book on HMOs, calls it a smokescreen, charging HMOs will still pay doctors a low fee per patient, whether they are satisfied or not.
I don't think Blue Cross has changed their stripes at all or their actual nature. They want to make money and they want to make the most money they can.
Blue Cross disagrees, claiming a happy patient is easier to treat and predicting they'll launch a healthcare trend. Sandra Hughes, CBS News, Los Angeles.
In the Middle East today, some of the worst fighting in nearly a month as Israeli troops and Palestinians traded gunfire in the Gaza Strip, leaving at least 8 wounded. The shooting started after Israeli bulldozers demolished more than 24 Palestinian houses that allegedly served as cover for gunmen. Palestinian families returned later to recover what they could from the rubble. In Poland, ceremonies marked the 60th anniversary of a World War II massacre. During the German occupation of one small town, hundreds of Polish Jews were murdered by their neighbors. For decades, Poland blamed the Nazis, but today, the Polish president acknowledged the truth and apologized. And Jamaican police and army troops are patrolling parts of Kingston, the capital, after 3 days of fighting with heavily armed street gangs. At least 23 people have been killed. On Thursday, Secretary of State Colin Powell will put out a report on a crime of global proportions, the international trade in human beings. CBS News Moscow correspondent Elizabeth Palmer reports it is a trade that leads right here to the United States.
You are looking at some of modern Russia's most valuable, if illicit, exports: women. The CIA estimates that thousands of Russian women a year are lured to the U.S. with offers of good jobs as models, housekeepers, or waitresses. Once there, though, they are trapped as sex slaves.
The women who are victims of trafficking are absolutely right to be in fear of their lives.
Gillian Caldwell spent 2 years investigating the trafficking of Russian women.
They're offered dramatic sums of money relative to what they're able to earn at home, and they have visions of a better life.
But here's the sleazy reality they face. Using hidden cameras, representatives of Witness and Global Survival Network posed as traffickers. In Russia, they found plenty of willing accomplices. This pimp, for example, said for $5,000 each, he could easily entice victims with phony classified ads. Once abroad, the pimps stripped the women of their wages and their passports and forced them to work as prostitutes. If they don't cooperate, the pimps threaten them and their families. Olga was only 17 when she signed a contract to work abroad, she thought, as a waitress. They locked us up, she said, and we were powerless because the local police were in on the game. These women may be naive, but they're also the victims of ruthless criminal organizations who use them to rake in millions of dollars. And most of them are too terrified to ask for help or to run away. So a coalition of Russian women's groups is trying to get the word out to beware of cushy foreign job offers. But the real challenge is to jail the pimps, and that's what a new U.S. law is designed to do. It increases the maximum sentence for some trafficking offenses to life. It allows victims to remain in the U.S. to testify against traffickers, and it provides for sanctions against countries which don't move to control the problem. But tough as the new American law is, Russia's economic reality is even tougher. The fact is, as long as Russian criminals have poor young women to prey on, the stream of victims from here is not likely to dry up. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, Moscow.
Still ahead on the CBS Evening News, Eye on America investigates work-at-home jobs. Some of them promise big bucks, but before you take one, better watch our report. Just about everybody's looking for a way to make a buck, most of them honest, hard-working people. Tonight's Eye on America is about companies who are ready to take advantage of them. CBS's Cynthia Bowers investigates work-at-home, get-rich-quick schemes that can put you on a fast track to the poorhouse.
Americans are bombarded by them every day. Just look in the jobs section of your local paper, or on a nearby telephone pole, or on the internet, and you'll see ads that promise big money for working at home. They certainly caught the attention of Vicki Wright.
I was just looking to supplement the job that I already have, so I could more comfortably pay my bills.
For Wright, a former healthcare worker, a job doing electronic medical billing from home seemed right up her alley. So she phoned the number on the ad and got a company called Unison Commerce.
He said, there's doctors in my area that need you. As soon as you get certified, they're going to start sending you work.
Wright says a company representative told her she would need computer software and a website to get started. Total price of $2,800, money she didn't have. So the company set her up with another firm that financed the deal. The non-cancelable lease carried a whopping 22.5% interest and cost an extra $1,200 over the course of 4 years. Wright also agreed to pay another $35 a month to yet another company so she could accept credit card payments. Armed with a list of doctors' addresses and assurances from Unison Commerce she can make $10,000 to $20,000 a month, Wright thought she was well on her way. She sent out 100 letters to doctors all over the country, but within weeks,
I started getting all the letters back, What did they say? Well, the envelope said no such address.
Wright says Unison Commerce never responded to her calls for help. And though she tried to get out of the contract last fall, she was still being billed this February, at which time she closed her checking account. The owner of Unison Commerce, Michael Ebbingham, says his company does nothing wrong. He contracts to build a website. The software comes from someone else. He says his company provides exactly what it promises. But Bill Mitchell of the Better Business Bureau in Los Angeles sees it differently.
What they're doing is taking the property, the money from these victims under false pretenses. That's a form of fraud.
Last year alone, the Federal Trade Commission prosecuted 4 medical billing scams it says ripped off consumers to the tune of $25 million. And though it won't verify any complaints against Unison Commerce, the Better Business Bureau tells us they've received hundreds of phone calls. And so far, 22 formal complaints have been filed. Mitchell says by involving the leasing company, Unison has upped the ante and the anguish for consumers.
What they've really bought is nothing but air. And what they've effectively done is borrowed about $3,000 or $4,000 to buy that air.
No matter what happens with Unison Commerce, Vicki and dozens like her are still legally on the hook to the leasing company, which means she will still be getting those bills long after she gave up on her business. For Eye on America, I'm Cynthia Bowers in Omaha.
The U.S. Postal Service was considering ending Saturday mail delivery to save money, but after an avalanche of protests from the public, business, and Congress, the Post Office said today 6-day delivery will continue. The mail will go through, even on Saturday. A federal jury here in New York today rejected the death penalty for Kanwan Mohammed of Tanzania, one of 4 men convicted by the jury in the 1998 bombings of 2 U.S. embassies in Africa. All 4 men now face life in prison. There's been far less progress in cracking another terror plot, the one behind the deadly attack on the USS Cole. And one reason, as CBS's Jim Stewart reports, is a turf battle between the investigators and the diplomats.
It's been 9 months since the USS Cole was attacked by suicide bombers in Yemen, and although several low-level suspects have been arrested by local authorities, the FBI's own probe now appears stalled by a feud with the State Department. The infighting is so bad that Barbara Bodine, the U.S. ambassador to Yemen, has barred the FBI supervisor in the case, John O'Neill, from entering the country, and there are currently no FBI agents working the case in Yemen. Today, the FBI acknowledged friction between the ambassador and supervising agent, but said it would not press the case for seeking his re-entry to Yemen. The State Department, meanwhile, characterized the disagreement as one over how secure Yemen was for FBI agents to do their job.
When they feel it's comfortable enough that they can go back, or that it's okay for them to go back, safe enough for them to go back, then I'm sure they will.
One sticking point has been the firearms agents use. Some FBI agents initially were barred by Ambassador Bodine from bringing assault rifles like these into Yemen. She wanted the agents to carry only small sidearms. Bodine was also under pressure from Yemen to limit the number of FBI agents there, a point some critics say the FBI is insensitive to.
FBI is notorious for showing up on scene and throwing its chest out and taking charge and trampling on local law enforcement. They do it in the United States and they do it overseas.
It's also a cultural thing between the FBI and the State Department. The State Department uses diplomacy to improve relations, while the FBI aggressively seeks evidence to solve crimes. Rarely do the two go together very smoothly. Jim Stewart, CBS News at the FBI.
Investigators are trying to determine what caused a U.S. Marine helicopter to crash into a river near Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. The Boeing CH-46 Sea Knight went down last night on a training mission, killing 3 crew members and injuring the pilot and co-pilot. Another helicopter on the same mission landed safely. There was an explosion of joy today in Croatia over the dramatic victory by Croatian tennis star Goran Ivanisevic at Wimbledon. Tens of thousands turned out in the Adriatic port city of Split to welcome the 29-year-old champion home. And true to form, the emotional Ivanisevic celebrated in his own distinctive way, stripping down to his skivvies and throwing his clothes to the cheering crowd. You'd have to score the whole ecstatic celebration love, love. And that's part of our world tonight. I'll be back later this evening here on CBS with 60 Minutes too. Take a good look at the closest living relatives to humans because they're going extinct. Can they be saved? Plus, what does it take to get a credit card? If you think you can't afford one, you can't afford to miss tonight's 60 Minutes too. And we invite you to join us for 60 Minutes too, tonight at 9, 8 Central, and usual time tomorrow for the hard news CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Back in a few on 62.
For news 24 hours a day, CBS.com on the internet and on our interactive partner, America Online at keyword CBS News.
Experience CBS News.